There is a saying that spread through the outer sectors of the Concord Alliance about 12 years after first contact with humanity. It went like this: leave the gray ships alone. Not a treaty, not a law, not a formal declaration from the High Council or any of the 81 species that made up the governing body of the known galaxy. Just a saying, passed from dockmaster to freighter captain, from patrol commander to new recruit, from the older generation to the younger, in the careful tone that people use when they want to make absolutely certain something is understood. Leave the gray ships alone. The gray ships were human vessels. You could identify them by their color, that flat, unremarkable gray-green that Earth's military had apparently decided was the correct shade for something that might need to become invisible in a hurry. They were not the largest ships in the galaxy. They were not the most advanced by conventional measurement. The Vorath had faster drives. The Sulvar had stronger shielding. The Keth Collective had weapons platforms that could reduce a moon to rubble in under 40 minutes. Human ships were not the most of anything. They were just the ones you did not touch. On the 14th day of the third rotation of the Concord year 2847, a Vor Sky privateer vessel called the Relentless Hand reached out and touched one anyway. This is the story of what happened next, and why nobody in the galaxy ever needed to be told twice again. Commander Dren Voke of the Vorsky Privateers was, by most accounts, a competent man. He had commanded the Relentless Hand for 11 years. He had taken 14 contracts, completed 13 of them, and the 14th had resulted in an outcome that was technically a draw, which, in his line of work, was close enough to a win that he kept the payment and slept soundly afterward. He was not a reckless man. He was not a cruel man. He was a professional, and professionals did not take unnecessary risks. What he was, on the 14th day of the third rotation, was behind schedule. The cargo he was carrying, 3 sealed containers of unregistered Sulvar isotopes, the kind that various interested parties would pay very good money to obtain, and that the Concord would very much prefer nobody obtain at all, needed to reach the outer reach station of Velos 7 within 6 standard days. He had 4 days left and roughly 8 days of travel remaining, assuming he took the approved shipping lanes and followed every posted regulation. He was not planning to do either of those things. The shortcut through Sector 14 Gamma had been flagged in the shipping database as restricted. The reason given was simple: active human survey and patrol zone. The recommendation was equally simple: find another route. Commander Voke looked at his timeline. He looked at the restriction notice. He looked at his timeline again, and he thought, it is a survey vessel, 1 ship, possibly 2. They will scan us, ask some questions, and we will be on our way. The humans are not known for boardings. They are not known for confrontation. The stories about them are exaggerated. Every species' stories about every other species are exaggerated, and in 11 years of operating in contested space, he had never once met a threat that a professional, careful approach could not manage. He set the new course. His navigation officer, a young Vorsky named Tessic who had been with the ship for 2 years, looked at the heading and then looked at his commander. Tessic said carefully that it routed them through the restricted zone. Voke said he knew where it routed them. Tessic noted that the shipping database specifically flagged it. Voke said he had read the shipping database. Tessic had spent 2 years learning which pauses in Commander Voke's conversations were invitations to continue and which were instructions to stop. This was the second kind. He said yes, sir, and set the course. The ISV Resolute was not supposed to be in Sector 14 Gamma either, technically speaking. She had been assigned to survey Grid 14 Gamma 7 through 14 Gamma 12, a narrow corridor of uninhabited space along the Concord frontier that Earth Command wanted mapped for potential relay station placement. It was not glamorous work. It was the kind of assignment that fell to patrol vessels between more significant deployments: 3 weeks of systematic scanning, cataloging, and filing reports that would eventually be read by someone in an office on a station somewhere, and filed in a database that someone else might look at in 6 years. Commander Yara Castillo had done this kind of work before. She was good at it. She was good at most things she turned her attention to. which was why she had been given a patrol vessel at 34, and why her crew of 27 trusted her in the specific, uncomplicated way that people trust someone who has never once given them a reason not to. She was reviewing the morning's survey results when her sensor operator, Ensign Kofi Mensah, looked up from his console with an expression that Castillo recognized. It was the expression of someone who had found something that was not supposed to be there. "Contact," Mensah said. "Bearing 270. Distance, 40,000 kilometers. Coming in on a direct intercept heading." Castillo set down her survey report and asked what species. "Vorsky hull configuration," Mensah said. "Privateer class." They came through the restricted corridor from the outer lane. They did not use the standard entry protocol. Castillo said they would not have, and told him to open a channel. The channel opened. She spoke in Concord Common, the shared trade language that most species in the Alliance had agreed to use for exactly these situations. She identified herself as Commander Castillo of the ISV Resolute, Earth Survey and Patrol, and informed the Vorsky vessel that they were in a restricted human operational zone. She requested they identify themselves, state their destination, and hold their current position for inspection. The response came after a delay that was precisely long enough to be deliberate. Commander Vogt identified his ship as the Relentless Hand and stated they were a registered commercial transport on a time-sensitive route with the correct Concord transit permits, and that they had no interest in conflict and requested passage. Castillo looked at Mensah. Mensah shook his head slightly. No Concord transit permits for a restricted zone would authorize a privateer vessel to bypass inspection. The permits Vogt was describing either did not exist or had been very expensively forged. She told Vogt she would need to see those permits in person and asked him to prepare for boarding inspection. Another deliberate pause followed. Then Vogt said he did not believe that would be possible today. The Relentless Hand's weapons systems came online. In 11 years of operating in contested space, Commander Dren Vogt had trained his weapons on perhaps 40 vessels. He had fired on 9. In every case, the other party had done one of two things: backed down or fired back in a way that Vogt's superior firepower had resolved quickly and in his favor. He was not expecting what happened next. Nothing happened. The ISV Resolute did not raise shields, did not return the weapons lock, did not attempt to maneuver. Commander Castillo's voice came through the channel again, and it was entirely calm. She told him she wanted to be very clear about what he had just done. He had raised weapons against a human vessel. She was now required, under Earth Military Protocol 7, to report this contact in full. That report would include his vessel identification, his current heading, his transponder code, and a complete record of the conversation. She told him she was not threatening him. She was informing him. There was a difference. She gave him 30 seconds to stand down his weapons and prepare for inspection. After that, she said, the conversation would become a formal incident report, and what happened after that would no longer be in her hands. Vogt made his decision in about 4 seconds. He had weighed the options with the speed of a man who had been in difficult situations before and trusted his own judgment. The human commander was one ship, lightly armed, no backup within reasonable range. He had checked before entering the sector. The incident report she was describing would take days to process through Alliance channels. By that time, he would be at Velos 7, the cargo would be delivered, and the Relentless Hand would be 3 sectors away with a new identity transponder and a full payment in hand. Reports could be filed. Investigations could be opened. The galaxy was large and administrative processes were slow. He made his calculation. He fired. The shot was a warning, a focused plasma burst aimed at the Resolute's forward sensor array. Disabling, not destroying. A message, not a massacre. Vogt was a professional, and professionals did not destroy Earth vessels if they could avoid it. They discouraged them. They sent them home limping. They made the calculation that a disabled survey ship was preferable to a dead survey ship in terms of what came afterward. He had not updated his information on what came afterward in quite some time. The plasma burst hit the Resolute's sensor array. The Resolute's emergency systems engaged. Backup sensors came online. Damage control teams moved with a speed and organization that Voke's own crew noted even in the middle of everything else. And Commander Castillo sent her report, not a distress call, not a request for backup. A report, formal, precise, complete. Vessel identification, transponder code, heading, the full record of the conversation, the nature of the weapon's fire, her current status, her crew's status, her vessel's status. The report went out on the Earth Military Emergency Channel. And then Commander Castillo held position, the relay. Antilles' hand was 40,000 kilometers away, weapons hot, and the Resolute held position. Damaged, sensors partially down, one crew member being treated for minor burns from the system shock. She held, because Commander Castillo understood something that Commander Voke did not. She did not need to fight him. She just needed to keep him here long enough. Earth Military Emergency Channel reports were processed by an automated priority system that categorized them by threat level, location, and available response assets. The report from Commander Castillo was categorized Priority 2, an engaged vessel requiring support. The system checked available assets in the sector. There were 3. The EMS Dreadnought-class vessel Steadfast Heart was on a routine patrol pass of the outer Concord frontier. Distance to Sector 14 Gamma, 4 hours at standard speed, 2.5 at full burn. The patrol frigate Kairos was finishing a resupply stop at Station Helix 4. Distance, 3 hours at full burn. The Joint Task Force Carrier Group 7, 2 cruisers, 4 destroyers, a carrier vessel, and its full complement of strike craft was completing a training exercise in the adjacent sector. Distance, 52 minutes. All 3 responded, not because they were ordered to. The report was flagged Priority 2, not Priority 1. Priority 2 did not automatically trigger a multi-vessel response. What it triggered was notification. The decision to respond was made by the individual commanders of each asset when they read the notification. All 3 made the same decision. In later testimony, when investigators from 3 separate conquered species asked them why they had responded without waiting for orders, the answers were remarkably consistent. Vice Admiral James Okonkwo, commander of the Steadfast Heart, said, "One of ours got hit. What other reason do you need?" Lieutenant Commander Priya Singh, commander of the Kairos, said she had read the report, seen that Castillo was holding position, and was not going to make her hold it alone. Fleet Admiral Chen Wei, commander of Carrier Group 7, said nothing. She simply showed the investigators her response time, 49 minutes from notification to arrival in sector. 3 minutes faster than the calculated minimum. On the relentless hand, the 52 minutes between Commander Castillo's report and the first new contact on Voke's sensors were the longest of his career. He had not moved. This was partly tactical. The damaged Resolute was not going anywhere, and his cargo was still time-sensitive, and partly because something about the human commander's comm had introduced a possibility into his thinking that he was trying very hard not to dwell on. She was not afraid. In 11 years of operating in contested space, Voke had fired on or threatened 40 vessels. In every case, every single case, he could identify the moment when the other side became afraid. It changed things. It changed the voice, the response time, the decision-making. Fear was readable. Fear was predictable. Fear was, in its own way, useful. Commander Castillo was not afraid. She had continued to respond to his communications with the same measured, unhurried tone. She had requested twice more that he stand down and prepare for inspection. She had informed him once that her crew was stable and her vessel was functional on backup systems. She had not threatened him. She had not pleaded with him. She had simply waited. Tessic was the first to see the new contacts. His voice, when he reported them, was not quite steady. He said there were multiple new contacts, Sector 14 Gamma approach vectors, then that he was reading 7 ships, 8 ships, then that he was reading mass signatures consistent with something he could not quite say out loud. He stopped, because the carrier had come out of warp. There are certain objects in the galaxy whose scale is difficult to process in real time. The Solvar home world's ring stations. The Keth Collective's deep space arrays. The ancient generation ships of the Aladar, still drifting at the edge of known space after 4,000 years. A human carrier-class vessel at operational deployment was on that list. It was not fast. It did not need to be. It was 2 kilometers of reinforced hull, drive systems the size of office buildings, weapons batteries that could track and engage 200 simultaneous targets, and a belly full of strike craft whose combined firepower exceeded the entire military capability of several mid-tier conquered species. It dropped out of warp at a distance of 30,000 kilometers, and it was not alone. The 2 cruisers came out on the flanks. The 4 destroyers arranged themselves in a pattern that Vok's tactical computer identified, after a moment of processing, as an encirclement formation. The frigates from the Kairos dropped into position between the Relentless Hand and the only clear exit vector. The Steadfast Heart, the Dreadnought, came in last at a distance that was close enough to be a statement and far enough to be a choice. 8 ships, in response to 1 damaged survey vessel, because a human commander had sent a report. Fleet Admiral Chen Wei's voice came through on the open channel. She spoke in Concord Common, as Commander Castillo had done. Her tone was the same, measured, unhurried, precise, as though 8 warships materializing around a privateer vessel was a routine administrative matter that simply needed to be processed in the correct order. She identified herself as Fleet Admiral Chen Wei, commanding Carrier Group 7 of the Earth Defense Fleet, and said she had reviewed Commander Castillo's incident report and would like to speak with Vok directly. Vok found, to his own surprise, that he was able to respond. He addressed her as Admiral. She said she wanted to be straightforward with him. He was currently surrounded. His vessel's tactical assessment system had almost certainly told him that his options in terms of engagement were limited. She was not going to pretend otherwise. What she was going to tell him was that the situation did not need to end in a way that was bad for anyone. What he had done, she continued, was fire on a human vessel. He had done it after being warned. He had done it after being given time and opportunity to stand down. He had made a calculation, and the calculation had not accounted for certain things. It happens, she said. What happens next is simple. He would stand down his weapons. He would prepare for boarding inspection. He would submit to the standard processing for vessels that fire on Earth military ships in restricted zones, which means his cargo would be confiscated. His vessel would be impounded pending investigation, and he and his crew would be transported to a Concord holding facility for formal proceedings. None of that was pleasant, she understood that, but she wanted him to notice something. They were having this conversation. Commander Castillo was alive. Her crew was intact. Her vessel was damaged but functional. He was surrounded by 8 Earth vessels, and she was asking him calmly to stand down. Not demanding, not threatening, asking, because that was how this worked. He had made a mistake. Mistakes have consequences. The consequences in this case were administrative, not lethal. But she needed him to understand something very clearly before he made any further decisions. That changes, she said, the moment anyone else on his crew gets hurt. Vok lowered his weapons. The incident in Sector 14 Gamma lasted, from first contact to complete resolution, 4 hours and 17 minutes. The boarding inspection of the Relentless Hand took 40 minutes. The confiscated cargo, 3 containers of unregistered Solvar isotopes, as Castillo had suspected, was logged, sealed, and transferred to the Steadfast Heart for transport to the nearest Concord processing facility. The Relentless Hand was impounded. Commander Vok and his crew of 19 were transported without incident. Commander Castillo's vessel was escorted to the repair station at Helix 4. The damage to her forward sensor array was assessed as repairable in 6 days. Her crew received treatment. Her report was filed. The incident was logged. Administratively, it was a routine matter. What was not routine was what happened in the 48 hours following the incident, as the sensor logs from 3 separate Concord species monitoring stations were reviewed, compiled, and quietly circulated. Someone, and to this day it is not clear who, obtained a copy of the timeline and distributed it through the Concord diplomatic network. The timeline was short. It contained the following facts. One human survey vessel damaged had sent a report, not a distress call, a report. 52 minutes later, 8 human warships were on scene, not because they were ordered, because they chose to be. The damaged vessel had held position the entire time. At no point did the Earth commander on scene act with aggression, make threats, or escalate beyond what the situation required. The privateer crew was alive, uninjured, and in formal processing. The timeline reached the desk of the Solvar ambassador to the Concord High Council within 6 hours of its circulation. The ambassador reviewed it twice. Then he forwarded it to the Secretary General of the Concord with a single line of commentary attached. It read, "I want to revisit our policy of classifying humanity as a mid-tier military power." The formal review of the incident took place 3 weeks later in the High Council chamber on Station Meridian 1. It was not a trial. It was, officially, an information session, a briefing for council members on the circumstances of the Sector 14 Gamma incident and its implications for shipping protocols in restricted human operational zones. 15 species were represented. Fleet Admiral Chen Wei attended as the senior Earth officer involved. Commander Castillo attended by remote link from Helix 4, where the Resolute was still in repair. The questions were careful, thorough, and in several cases, pointed in a direction that had nothing to do with shipping protocols. Delegate Shal of the Keth Collective asked Admiral Wei about the response time, specifically how the standard procedure could produce 52 minutes for the carrier group, which was the furthest away. Admiral Wei said there is no standard procedure that produces that response time. The standard procedure for a Priority 2 incident notification is acknowledgement within 4 hours and response deployment within 24. Shal asked how it happened then. Wei said the commanders responded on their own initiative. They read the report and they moved. Shal was quiet for a moment. He asked if all 3 of them did. Wei said all 3 of them. Another pause settled over the room, the kind that happens when a piece of information has arrived that needs to be absorbed before anyone can say anything useful. Delegate Mori of the Vellani Confederation asked Commander Castillo about the 52 minutes she held position with a damaged vessel, degraded sensors, and a hostile privateer at weapons lock. Castillo's face on the remote link was composed, not proud, not dramatic, just straightforward, the way she had been throughout. She said she knew they were coming. She sent the report. Once you send the report, you hold position. You do not give the other party a reason to escalate, and you do not give your people a reason to think you have lost confidence. You hold, and you wait. Maury asked if she was not afraid. Castillo considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. She said of course she was afraid. She had a damaged ship and an armed privateer 40,000 kilometers away. Being afraid is reasonable. What you do while you are afraid, that is the part that matters. There is something the conquered species had not fully understood about humanity in those early years, and the Sector 14 Gamma incident brought it closer to the surface than any diplomatic briefing or military exercise ever had. They had looked at Earth's fleet numbers and calculated threat assessments. They had examined human weapons technology and rated it against their own standards. They had read the historical records of Earth's conflicts and categorized humanity as a species prone to organized violence, which was accurate, but they had missed the more important thing beneath that observation. They had missed the reason. It was not that humans were violent. Many species in the galaxy had been violent at one point or another in their development. What was particular about humanity was the direction of that violence, the organizing principle beneath it, the thing that made a survey ship commander hold position against an armed privateer without flinching for 52 minutes while she waited for people she trusted to show up. The Keth Collective's intelligence division had come close in their assessment. The commanders responded because one of theirs was in danger, but that framing still missed something. It made it sound instinctive, reflexive, like a school of fish turning in unison because one of them turned. It was not that. It was a choice. Vice Admiral Okonkwo chose to burn his drives at maximum rate for 2.5 hours because a junior officer he had never met was holding position against a weapons lock. Lieutenant Commander Singh chose to leave a half-finished resupply and move because she read the word held in a report and understood what it meant. Fleet Admiral Chen Wei chose to arrive 3 minutes ahead of the calculated minimum, not because she had better engines, but because she started moving before the system had finished calculating. These were not reflexes. They were decisions made by individual human beings who had each, at some point in their training or their career or their life, made a decision about what kind of person they were going to be when it mattered. And when it mattered, they were that person. What Commander Voke remembered most about the incident in the years that followed was not the carrier dropping out of warp. It was not the encirclement or the Admiral's voice on the channel or the moment he lowered his weapons. It was the 52 minutes before any of that. It was the Resolute, sitting there in space, damaged, outgunned, alone, and not moving. He had been in many standoffs over his career. He had seen species respond to superior force in every way you could imagine. Some fought. Some ran. Some negotiated frantically, throwing offers and concessions into the silence hoping something would catch. What he had never seen before Commander Castillo was someone simply wait, not passively, not helplessly. Wait the way a person waits who knows exactly what is coming and has already decided that whatever comes before it is manageable. It was the most unnerving thing he had ever encountered in 11 years of contested space operations, and he had encountered quite a few things. He spent a significant portion of his time in the Concord holding facility thinking about it. He spoke to his assigned legal representative about it. He mentioned it once to a Keth psychologist who was conducting behavioral assessments on detainees for reasons that the collective declined to specify in detail. The psychologist had been quiet for a long time after Voke finished describing the 52 minutes. Then she said very carefully that she thought she understood, that the behavior he had described was not a tactic. It was a form of communication. Commander Castillo had not been sending a message with her weapons or her maneuvering or her words. She had been sending a message with her stillness. And the message was, I have already sent for them, and they are already coming. And you do not yet know what that means, but you will. The Concord High Council did not make any formal statements about the Sector 14 Gamma incident beyond the standard procedural conclusions of the information session. No new treaties were proposed. No emergency resolutions were passed. The shipping protocols for restricted human operational zones were updated with clearer language, and a note was added to the transit database recommending that vessels requiring time-sensitive routing in the outer sectors consult with Earth Survey and Patrol before entering flagged corridors rather than simply ignoring the flags. Administratively, that was the end of it. But the things that happen administratively are rarely the things that matter. What mattered was happening in the corridors outside the council chamber, and in the communications channels between military attachés, and in the careful conversations between species representatives who had spent the 3 weeks since the incident quietly reevaluating assumptions they had held for a long time. The Solvar revised their military classification of humanity upward, twice, within 90 days. The Velani Confederation requested a joint patrol agreement with Earth Survey and Patrol that had been proposed 3 years earlier and allowed to stall in committee. The Keth Collective said nothing publicly, but their internal intelligence assessment was thorough and, in its own way, more revealing than anything said in the council chamber, because it was honest in the way that things said only to yourself can be. The relevant conclusion, the one that was eventually leaked and eventually read by most of the people who needed to read it, was not about weapons or fleet sizes or response times. It was about the question that mattered. If one of their people is in danger, how many others will act without being told to? Based on current data, the answer appears to be all of them. The gray ships were still gray. They were still not the fastest or the most powerful by the numbers that appeared in comparative fleet assessments. They still moved through the outer sectors on survey routes and patrol passes, and the quiet, unglamorous work of maintaining a presence in space that most species found unremarkable until they needed it to be otherwise. Commander Castillo returned to duty 6 days after the incident, once the Resolute sensor array was repaired. Her report on the incident was thorough and precisely formatted, as all her reports were. She did not include in it any account of what she had been thinking during the 52 minutes she held position. That was not the kind of information that went into reports. What went into reports were facts: vessel identification, headings, weapons signatures, crew status, outcome. The facts were sufficient. They told the story that needed to be told. The rest of it, the part that was not in any report and would never be in any report, was something she kept for herself. What she thought about, during those 52 minutes, was not the privateer 40,000 kilometers away. She thought about a training exercise 7 years earlier, when she had been a junior officer on a patrol frigate in a different sector, and a senior commander had told her something she had never forgotten. He had said, "There is a moment in every difficult situation where you find out what you actually believe, not what you think you believe, not what you have told yourself you believe, but what your body does when the choice arrives." Most people never find out. The ones who do find out usually wish they could go back and make different decisions earlier, so that, when the moment comes, they already know the answer. She had thought about that for 7 years. And when the moment came, in Sector 14 Gamma, in a damaged survey vessel 40,000 kilometers from an armed privateer, she had already known the answer. She held position, and she waited. The saying did not change after the incident. It had been passed from dockmaster to freighter captain, from patrol commander to N.U. recruit, from the older generation to the younger, for 12 years before the relentless hand made its miscalculation. It continued to be passed the same way afterward, in the same careful tone, with the same simple words. But what changed in the telling of it was the thing behind the words. Before the incident, the saying was advice. It was practical guidance from experienced operators who had learned through observation that certain actions produced certain consequences, and that the consequences of touching a gray ship were disproportionate to whatever might be gained. After the incident, the saying was still advice. It was still practical guidance. But it was also something else. It was a story, not about the weapons or the fleet or the carrier dropping out of warp at 30,000 kilometers. The story was about a damaged survey vessel, sitting still in the middle of a restricted sector, with a weapons lock on her hull and 52 minutes of silence ahead of her, not moving, not fleeing, not fighting, just waiting with the particular patience of someone who has already made all the decisions that matter and is now simply letting the situation arrive at the conclusion she had already determined. The people who heard the saying after the incident heard it differently. They understood it differently. They passed it on with a different weight in their voice. Leave the gray ships alone, not because of the weapons, though the weapons were considerable, not because of the fleet, though the fleet was substantial, but because of something harder to quantify and harder to prepare for. Because of what a gray ship commander does when she is alone and damaged and outgunned, and there is nothing between her and a weapons lock but 52 minutes of empty space. She holds. She waits. And the galaxy has learned, in the years since the 14th day of the third rotation of the Concord year 2847, that those 52 minutes are not empty at all. They are full. Full of people who read a report and decided, without being told, that they were already on their way. Leave the gray ships alone. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. Genuinely. Stories like this one take time to build right. If it held your attention, if there was a moment where you felt something, that is exactly what this channel is here for. We are just getting started. There are more stories coming. More human commanders who do the impossible thing because it was the right thing. More moments that the galaxy was not prepared for. If you want to be there for those, subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it means this channel can keep going. And if this story made you think of someone who would appreciate it, send it to them. Word of mouth is how channels like this one survive. I will see you in the next one. Stay human.